Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas. I'm going to be your host today, and we're going to be talking about maximizing brand impact through content creation. So, standing out in a crowded market or busy industry is always a challenge, especially as an indie studio. But what if there was a way to stand out and create impact while shaping your studio's identity? Well, it's all possible, as today we'll explore the power of content creation and how that can not only create awareness and engagement, but help showcase your studio's brand too. And by discussing effective and innovative approaches, we'll share ways that your studio can stand out in compelling and meaningful ways that your brand is able to create some impact. So that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey everybody, and we're back, and today with us I have Sophia Miller with us. Sophia, how is it going? And thank you for being on the show with us today.
Hi, thank you. It's going really well. It's actually like sunny in Portland right now, which is perfect. So I can get that natural light. Not that people can see me, but you can.
Yeah, no, I mean, natural light is always great and appreciated, especially, when we have a lot of dark days and stuff from rain or whatever else. So I love it too. We had a little bit of mix of clouds, but we are doing well. And yeah, folks, for those of you who don't know Sophia, she is a brand marketing manager. She's an expert in brand strategy, social media management, and digital content creation in the film and gaming industry. So a lot of cool experience. Currently right now she's marketing manager and video producer courier at Dragons Within, and also the associate brand marketing manager at Congregate. She has been in the past. And also just a long-standing history of video production and marketing. She did work for board games at some of these places, or in the past too, like with Hog Wild Toys and Mulligan Games. So not just video games as well, just a huge array of experience, and why she's here with us today. But as we called out to some of her experience too, she's also worked on various film projects as well. In college, did so in for film and gaming. So lots and lots of experience in these areas, and which is pretty cool and interesting. And actually, speaking of interesting, I was just curious in terms of, you do a lot of work in these areas and stuff, but when you're trying to unplug and whatnot else, what are other things that keep you going and fulfilled and having fun when you're not busy in all this content creation across all these different industries?
It's actually funny that you mentioned that, because when I got my first job in video games specifically, it was just coming out of the pandemic, when it's all I was doing was video games all the time. And so I was like, wait, now my entire life is kind of video games. And so I had to stop playing video games for a little while, because it's I was playing them all day at work. And so it was okay, I need to find other things to do. But in doing that, I started noticing that I was gamifying the other things that I was doing,
Yes.
gamifying cleaning my house, gamifying doing exercise, things like that.
I absolutely love that. And it's funny too, right? Like some of the hobbies and different things and interests we have, how they actually are influenced, from the games, from the work that we do within games. I love sharing this story, and I'm sure I shared it here on the podcast a few times, but in my past, I remember playing not doing too well with Final Fantasy 12, the Gambit system in there. And then I stopped playing it. Life happened. I ended up working in different marketing agencies, and in doing so, managing ads. After that, I went back to playing Final Fantasy 12 again and realized my day job actually helped me play or use that system better because basically I was doing the same thing at work. And I was like,
That's,
this is so cool how you could take these and apply it in different ways and capacities and stuff. And yeah, games are just such a wonderful thing. So awesome
that's
stuff.
amazing.
All right.
I recently found my like Game Boy that I had from when I was a
No.
really little kid, and I remember I had this Finding Nemo game, and there was this one level that like would make me so angry as a child. Like, and I was not really an angry person. I'm still not an angry person, but I just remember just this rage that I had because I could never pass it. And recently I like found this Game Boy and I was like, oh my gosh, it actually still had battery in it. Even though I haven't charged it in a while. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was like playing through it. And I was like, I ended up getting, to the next level. And I was like, I can't believe that this is like the thing that like was the bane of my existence as like an 8-year-old.
Well, I know the bane of my sister's existence was Kirby's Pinball, because we would have like competitions with each other on Game Boy about who could get the best score. And then she topped me and I topped her and she topped me. And then finally I played so hard to the point where it wasn't even possible for her to beat me. I'll still cherish that. But anyways, Meg, if you're listening, I'm sorry. All great stuff. Thank you for sharing that. And we're going to get into our conversation, but in a moment, because first we need to go through the Q Box round. And folks, for those of you who aren't familiar, the Q Box round are just a few kind of random questions I prepared for Sophia today. So Sophia, are you ready for the Q Box round?
We'll see.
All right, we'll see. Let's do it. All right, first, what advice would you give someone else that's just starting out?
One, just do the thing. Just do it.
Just do it. Someone else shared that
it.
not too long ago. I love it. Okay.
Was it Shia LaBeouf?
It was not.
Well, I think like it's really easy to be scared that you're not good enough. And in my opinion, it doesn't matter because you have to do everything for a first time. I mean, like, one of my friends was sharing how like she's potty training her son and sometimes he gets it down and sometimes he doesn't. And like, even when we're like 2 or 3 years old, it's like, we're always doing everything for the first time. We're still doing that as adults. Like, it's okay. Just do it.
Love it. All right. Next, what's the most common mistake you see companies make in the industry with their businesses?
Okay, so this one made me think a lot because, like, I've been looking a lot at, like, video game trailers and things like that. And I'm trying to, like, figure out what makes a good trailer. And, like, how is it different from, like, TV show trailers and movie trailers and things like that? So I kind of, like, came up with, like, this two-pronged answer, but they like relate to one another, which is one, I think that people forget the mediums that they're working with. So like, for example, when you're taking like a book and then you're turning it into a movie, a lot of times people talk about like, oh, I hated the movie, like don't watch the movie, the book is way better. But that's not always the case. There's some movies that people are like, I love the book and I love the movie. They're completely different and I love both. And I think it's because those people have realized the mediums that they're working with. They're taking the story from the book, but they're making it make sense for film. And I think that a lot because the video games industry is a little bit newer than the film industry, I think sometimes we look to the film industry a little bit too much instead of recognizing the actual medium that we're working with, which is gaming. And people are like interacting with games in a way that they're not interacting with films. So I think that's part of it. But the other thing that I think that people do is thinking that only one thing can work. And this is like related because it's like, thinking like only the way that the film industry has been doing it can work. And so I think it's really good to experiment. It's good to like see what it is that is working for other people, but to also like recognize what makes you different and unique. Because if you make a game that's exactly like another game, people aren't going to buy it because they're just going to buy the other game. I mean, not always, but a lot of the time. And so I think it's like good to see what works, but then also like have yourself stand out a little bit more. Realize like it's okay to be experimental. It's okay to take a little risk, because sometimes that's the thing that actually propels you to being like the much better version.
Yeah. No, I love those points too, because, and again, I think that happens a lot. I mean, I know a lot of times, and I've seen this happen a few times myself, working with people is, like, again, like you said with trailers, they're always looking to something else that they kind of either aspire to or is influencing their decisions, and like, oh, let's make it really narrative focused. It's like, well, but with the game that you're showing, people want to see the gameplay, not that they don't want a narrative, but they don't want to see a quick glimpse of the narrative because it might not be as revealing as it would be with the gameplay, because ultimately that's the main factor why we're playing a game is for the game. So yeah, a lot of interesting things there in terms of like, I guess the mistakes that people are doing is just like, hey, look, don't just try more of the same. Try to do something maybe a little bit different that's one applicable to your industry, your medium, your whatever, and then do something a little bit different. Stand out, even if it's a little riskier. Like, oh wow, I would never do that. Maybe that's an indication you should do it. Within reason, though, folks. Like, we don't want to take complete craziness liberty in this, but hey, it's good to experiment, right? So, Great one. All right. Last but not least, and the staple here on the show is, what game are you playing now?
Okay, so here's my problem is I get like really excited and then I just like start a million games. So I've been playing the same like 10 games for like the past year, and people are probably like, why do you keep mentioning the exact same games? But I'm almost done with Horizon Forbidden West. And I think I'm like halfway through Alien Isolation. But I took a pause on that so I could actually finish Horizon Forbidden West, because I'm borrowing that one from someone, and I was like, I should probably finish this and give it back. And then I like am in the beginning stages of Breath of the Wild. I'm always playing Overwatch. I'm always playing Polytopia, which is by Mijiwan. It's a mobile game, and I love it so much. My friend discovered it in college. Yeah. And I think those are all the main games I'm playing right now.
All right, sweet. Well, I love that lineup. Definitely a good one. I've been thinking about playing Breath of the Wild again, but it's all a matter of when I get the Switch, because kids like to play that too. But anyway, so I guess I need to get another one. Regardless, thank you so much for sharing that and all those really helpful insights there. And now, why don't we get right into the heart of our conversation today, which I think is an important one, because I don't think a lot of people are doing enough of this. And what is this? It's maximizing brand impact through content creation. And I mean, folks, I know content creation is pretty broad, but a lot of what I believe we're going to be talking about today more than anything is content creation in the form of video. Now, we're probably going to get into some other areas too, but video, because let's face it, there's a lot we can do with video. And if you think in video, we're probably just thinking clips and trailers, right? But what else can we do? And that's what we're here to explore with Sophia today. So to kick things off, and I know this is a big one, but how do you see the relationship between brand marketing and content production in the context of indie games? It's really open. There's a lot we can go in here, but what's your take on this? What's this relationship between these two things?
Yeah. So it's funny because like, even though I've been doing brand marketing for a while now, like I would say maybe like at least once a month I Google what is brand marketing. Because I'm like, what is it? How is it different from any other type of marketing? And I think what I'm realizing is that there actually isn't a difference between brand marketing and any other type of marketing. It's all kind of related. And like I feel this way about a lot of things in general, like about, I have language as a hobby. People like to travel. We live in this is like I feel like this is getting even more broad, but like we live in a globalized society. Like we all interact with one another, and like I think it's like a good thing to like actually act as if that is the case. Like, stop making like unnecessary like separations between people. And I think this in like schools and education, like I don't fully understand why it has to be like, this is math class, this is history class, this is English class, this is science class. I felt that I learned the most when the teachers who are teaching me about a particular subject can actually relate this scientific fact with the history that was going on at the time, and how like math relates to this scientific principle, and things like that. Like, or in English, like this book was written during this time when this was going on historically. And I also see that with marketing too, where it's like your brand is really your story and who you are and who your company is. And like I don't think it's necessary to like have such distinct like separations between all of the different pieces. And then like specifically, how does that have to do with content creation? Is like I think creating content is the easiest way to tell that story. Like you're literally just like going up to people and like, it can be like a TikTok video with your face on it, or whoever the face of your company is, and say like, this is our story. Do you relate to it? Come join us.
Yeah, I love that too because, let's take a step back and like how you broke that down, because it's important. Because when we hear brand marketing, it might sound more corporate and big business and all this other stuff. And I think it's great that you shared that, like, oh, I just Google it sometimes just to make sure, is this something very different or not? And it's not that you're questioning yourself. I think it's just more so of like making sure that whatever you're doing at that moment is in line with what you know. And it always is. And let's face it, like you said, there's different ways of phrasing things regardless of industries. There's different languages, there's different everything else. And then when you come back, it's like, okay, if there's so many things that are different, that doesn't necessarily mean too, when you're talking about like the different subjects and stuff. It's so like when we keep separating these things so much, it can overcomplicate it when it's like, well, what's really the main principle here? What's our intent? What's our focus? And you're like, hey, we're just people trying to look at these things. And brand marketing is really just about what's our story? How does it relate to the context of games? And then how do we create a more maybe interesting and different ways to share these experiences with people? And how do we do that is with content and having some context. And again, now everything comes together, even though, we just took this whole concept of these things that sound really big. And I don't know, for some of us, I'm sure kind of scary without sounding cheesy, but still that's the case. And now it kind of makes a lot more sense. So I love that response. And in light of that, I want to kind of like dive in a little bit more and talking about like discussing, incorporating branding into video content. So you shared a little glimpse at the end there about that, but what are ways this can happen? Like what would you say are some key strategies that, indie game developers or studios can effectively incorporate branding into their content? And regardless of whatever the content is, let's say dev blogs or trailers or any other type of content, what are some interesting or creative ways that people can effectively incorporate their brand into their content while, promoting their game too, of course?
Yeah. So I think that like good like strategies for this, and I'll give an example as well of like a way that I've done it recently. But like figuring out what is unique to you, what is unique, what is you. I'm going to say that again.
That's fine.
Figuring out what is unique to you, what is unique to your game, and what is unique to maybe the many games that you've created under like your company's umbrella. And there's going to be multiple things. There's not just going to be one thing that makes you and what you do unique. And kind of creating like this, basically like brand guidelines to go by. It's going to be like, what tone are we going for? What is the story that we're trying to tell? And that could be like in the very literal sense, like the story that you're telling in game. But it could also be like, what are we trying to tell people? Like, who is our audience? Why are they our audience? Like, for example, in Horizon Zero Dawn and Horizon Forbidden West, there's a lot of themes about, treating our world, our environment, like kindly, and, working with people who, are different from us, and like fostering this like sense of togetherness, even if, we don't always like agree with someone, we can still find ways that we can like peacefully like coexist with one another and work together to have like a certain mission. And like I think a lot of people have something to say with whatever medium they're doing it in, whether it's a film or a book, a comic, or a game. And like understanding that and what that is and telling that story is really important. I remember there was some indie developers. I'm trying to remember what it was called, what the game was called. I think the company was Mystic Moose. I wish I could remember the game's name right now. But their game had a lot to do with like the environment and reminding people to take care of the environment and to participate like with it, like go out into nature, go on hikes, like even though it's like a video game, like reminding people like, hey, we also have this beautiful world that you should be involved with. And so I think like figuring that out, like why are you doing this? What are you trying to tell people? That's like the most important thing to help kind of guide your strategy and your brand guidelines. And then a way that I've done this recently was with Courier Dragons Within. And the story of Courier Dragons Within is, finding a way to healthily interact with masculinity, and doing that in nature, and finding ways to like meditate within nature so that you can like find that like healthy masculinity and healthy sense of self. And so one of our kind of like branding pieces is breathing, which is one of the mechanics in the game, really meditation, but breathing is part of that. And so at the beginning of quite a few of our TikToks, we have this like breathing sound that kind of brings you into the TikTok. And that's kind of like a hook, an introduction, the part of the content that like signals to the audience, like this is Courier Dragons Within.
I absolutely love that last example there because, I mean, folks, if you think about it, from all the themes and all the other examples that Sophia was talking about, it really touches into kind of another level, like another depth, if you will, as various ways to, let's say, resonate with that audience more, or to really imply or focus or hone in on that specific principle that the studio or whatever their goal is going for. Like basically what they're doing is they outline what she shared with us is they're outlining and nailing down what their intent is as it relates to their brand, their focus, what's important to them, their values and stuff, and are finding little cool, interesting ways that are extremely subtle. And some people might not pick up about it, but then it's like, okay, we introduced this clip with breathing. So immediately what's being triggered inside our minds, especially the more, instinctive characteristics of us as humans, and now how does this go back and relate to all the other goals and objectives that they have with their branding? So just I don't know. There's so much like real awesome deep level stuff there, and if you think about it, it's not necessarily overly complicated. It's just more about keeping an open mind to these things, and they're just little simple things that can really have a big impact in creating that greater message overall, and just yeah, incorporating the brand essentially in very interesting and unique ways. I absolutely love it.
Thank you. And what one thing that's like also kind of funny is I've noticed after like creating these videos, when I go back to watch them, I find myself breathing along with the like breath that you hear at the beginning of the video, which like inherently like calms me down. Like there's so many times where I've been like, I didn't even realize I was stressed until I watched one of these videos and I went, and then I was like, oh my gosh, I just let go so much of the tension I was holding on to. And so I think it's like really good to like see those things, like what is it that you're trying to do with your audience, because you can do that.
Yeah. And that's another great example too, because think about it. In that moment, you're like listening. It's like, oh, it's reminding you to breathe. And then you're like, oh, I just released all that stuff. And then, so now that's a positive moment, right? And now that positive moment is now being linked back to, oh, it was this content about this game. Oh, I had a positive moment when I was thinking or interacting with something with this game. And it's like almost like haptic feedback. It's reinforced. It's all these other really cool things that are going on. And we're making these really interesting things that are happening. And this stemmed out a conversation about brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
these are some of the really cool things that can happen when you just, think of things differently, or approach them a little bit differently. So absolutely love those examples, especially how, how it can be incorporated. And, sometimes it just takes a little of extra thought and some guidance. And we can kind of discover these things in really unique and creative ways. So absolutely love that. Well, all right. So we talked some bit about how to incorporate branding into content and things like that. Now, let's face it though. I'm sure there's a lot of people that might have a little bit more difficulty and some challenges trying to get to this stuff, to get to this level. So I'm curious too, like, let's say people, they have all the right intentions and everything else. What would you say in your experience though that are some of the, more common mistakes, developers make when it comes to not just understanding what branding is, for their studio, but also how do they express that? Because if they're in the mindset of, oh, I want to just create gameplay footage or content and just showcase my game, and that should be end. But when they're struggling to connect better or resonate with people, I guess, yeah, what are some of these mistakes that they're making when it comes to trying to execute those things, but not hitting that mark?
I thought of like three different things when you were talking. So let's see if I can like remember all of them. One is, one that I talked about earlier, which is just like that fear of failing, keeping you from actually doing. I think it's healthy to have that fear. I have the fear of failing all the time, but I don't let it keep me from doing what I want to do or what I feel passionate about doing. The second thing I thought of was people trying a little too hard to do things that they think would be the right move, but that they can't do sustainably. Like maybe it's not something that they enjoy doing, or maybe it's something that, they don't really like have the capacity to keep up. Like maybe they like doing it, but they're only able to spend, so much time doing it because it just takes a lot out of them. And I think it's like good and healthy to do those things, every once in a while. But the things that you should like really focus on are the things that you can sustainably keep up with, the things that make you feel good and that give you energy. For me, that's making videos. I love making video content, and I can make way more video content than I can, doing other things, because it gives me energy to do it. It makes me feel good when I'm done doing it. It gives me like the happy brain chemicals. And so I think that's what you should focus on, whatever it is. And then what was the third thing?
Well, as you think about that, I'm going to call out to that last part there too, because it's an important one. I've had some feedback where people reach out to kind of on a similar note or a related one where, hey, this and that is important, but what if there's no drive or passion or when it involves those things and I don't find it or I have it and then it goes away. I think to your point, what you just said is great because it's like, it's funny. I have a background in film, and for me, when it comes to creating, let's say, content, I'm like, that seems like it's so much more work, even though I understand and know these things, right? But there could be a variety of reasons for that. But in your case, you're like, that's my go-to. That's giving me all the happy chemicals and everything else. But to the point, everybody's going to find their passion, their drive, what's going to keep fueling that creativity, that's going to fuel the ability to create that content and do everything else. So, run with it. If it's working out for you and doing well, then great. If it doesn't, but you kind of like it, but you can't do it sustainably, then do it here and there. I mean, those points couldn't be any more valid there. And yeah, I think sometimes we get caught up in like, oh, we need to do this, we need to do this. It's like, well, who's saying you need to do it? Why do you have to do that? Like, who's telling you this? Is it, if it's your inner critic, fine, but if that inner critic is based off of everything else that you see, well, that's not validation enough, because it's ultimately down to you. And like you said, that this is what works for me and this is what I do and this is what makes everything else work. And it's different for everybody.
Yeah. And I remember the third thing because it's related to the second.
Excellent.
The third thing is like thinking too hard about like making the perfect piece of content. It's actually related to both the first and the second. Like a lot of times people just want to see what's relatable to them. Recently, I was talking to a friend of mine that I've been working with on Courier Dragons Within. Her name is Edna Lopez Rodriguez, and she works at Shell Games. And she and I were talking about how I want to make more content. And we were saying like I was saying I see all these videos of people making cozy content, and I don't have like a cute cozy gaming space. Like it's just my in-home office, and it's like, okay, like I have my regular like white desk and I have like a shelf with things on it. It's not like there's not all these like cute neon lights and blankets and stuffed animals and things like that.
Yep.
And so she was like, well, I think that's most people's gaming setup. And I was like, yeah. And she was like, so make relatable cozy gaming content. Don't make like this gaming content of like, oh, look at how much money I have. I was able to spend on 3 monitors and like a ton of different lights and things like that. Make your like, if you want to like give people a tour of your cozy gaming setup, show them your like random shelf that you've had since you were 8 years old and the white desk that like isn't, pink or blue or green or purple, and your Christmas lights that you have hanging up because you don't have like these other fancy neon lights. And this is my cozy gaming setup that I have since made with like some artwork that a friend created and stuff like that, and this like random piece of cloth that I have hanging up instead of a green screen.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love it. And I think that's the key part, and a great example is like, it doesn't matter what else is the norm, what else is, because here's the other thing too. In some other spaces that I follow, someone called out to this, like, basically what you just called out is that's being me. That's me being authentic. This is what I have, and it's just that's fine. It doesn't have to fit a certain persona or type or trend or whatever you want to call it. In this instance, it's like it's me. That's okay. But I'm also by keeping this and doing it, maybe I might want to make some types of changes, but I want to do so with the right intent, not necessarily driven by other outside factors. And in doing so, you come off as being authentic, and that's where I was leading to that common moment in this other space where authenticity is, I think, being valued more and more often now. Where even from what in this, I think it was an email or newsletter, they were calling out to how being more authentic with video. So less editing, less doing these other things. I mean, if you think about it, these are kind of like trends that we're seeing in things like TikTok too and stuff, where if you're being more authentic and original, people respect that. They're like, hey, okay, great. Because I think people are getting the hint now that, okay, not everything's done in one take. Like for me, example, I've remembered I'm much better at it now than earlier, but I could do my intros and do, let's say, 20 different takes. And here's the thing. Most of the time they're written or like, but still that many takes. Yeah, it happens. Like I stumble my words. Oh, I needed to phrase that differently or whatever. But you know, that's just how it is. But to a degree you get better, but also, you know, there's reasons why you don't want to be too authentic. I'm not going to share 20 different takes with you guys in terms of an intro. That would be like the whole entire episode, right? But the point being is that level of authenticity is important. And it goes back to what you said too about trying to be like, try to mirror or look at other bigger influences out there. Like what's the film industry doing, or what's even AAA doing, or, you know, and try to mirror off of that. It's like, no, maybe that can guide some principle, but be authentic, but in that authenticity, like you said, standing out. How can you stand out? How can you differentiate a little bit by doing something a little bit different? Maybe it might be a little crazy, but it will stand out.
Exactly.
So definitely love those examples and everything else. So, you know, I know we're coming on time a little bit here, but for a last question, before we close, what's like some advice that you'd give to indie game developers who, let's say, just may have limited resources? I mean, we kind of talked about that in just a moment ago. You know, when it comes to like dressing our background in our area in which we're recording some of this content. So for those who have limited resources, what would you say are things that that they can do when they're trying to find effective and impactful ways, you know, again, to incorporate branding into their overall marketing strategy?
Yeah. Don't be afraid to ask yourself what your weaknesses are, because sometimes your weakness is actually, one, your strength, but two, it's really part of the thing that makes you unique. I remember I was reading somewhere about how about the Nintendo Switch and about how, you know, it's you know, like it's a console competitor, and you know there are these other consoles like PlayStation and Xbox that are, you know, like they have like a really large capacity to like play like some really intense games. And the Nintendo Switch doesn't necessarily have that same capacity. And so in what world could it even compete? But the way that it, like, the weakness that it had, that it was like, you know, it didn't have quite as intense I can't remember the word, but just
processing power, and because in everything else like that could be done within with that. Yep.
Yes, thank you. Processing power. Yeah, since it didn't have quite as intense of like processing power, it had to be like, okay, well, how can we turn this weakness into a strength? And, you know, it's a portable console. You can take it with you anywhere. You can also have it play on your TV when you want to play with friends. But if if you're going on a road trip, you're going to be in an airplane, you can bring your console with you and play it. And that is something that PlayStation and Xbox, they can't do that. I mean, you know, they've had some affordable versions, but the Nintendo Switch really leaned into that. And so I think doing that is like really good. Like it's recognizing that your biggest strength and your biggest weakness are probably very related to one another. And that's part of what makes you unique, and you can find your unique like selling points in those things. Um,
Well,
and then
sorry, I was just gonna share a quick example that I do all the time,
yeah.
but like another like weakness type situation, and I think another way too to kind of rephrase this for some other people looking maybe at it differently is like, you know, find strengths and limitations, right? Because like
Yeah.
what is it? Silent Hill. When that came out, they wanted this big, vast, open world, scary environment, but then they found out that like, oh, we can't do what we wanted to do, so because of the limitations of the system, and they're like, oh, we'll make it foggy. Oh man, that was way more effective, right?
Yeah. Yes, I remember reading that recently too.
And what's a very recent one, which I don't mean to bring up a negative thing, but you know, about the time of this recording, Helldivers 2.
Oh yeah.
They had to switch things
Yes.
up because of you know, the requirements by PlayStation to have PC users have an account and all that stuff. But so what they did was they made a cape
Mm-hmm.
of the negative reviews basically, or that graph on one of the capes for the characters and stuff. Which by itself, if you didn't know, that just does look like a pretty badass cape too. But look, it's like that's a weakness. Clearly, negative reviews are not a good thing for that fact. But then, how could you take that and make it into a strength, right? So all
Exactly.
and these are all giving you maybe multiple different ideas, because it's like there's lots of ways to go about doing this, whether it's within the restrictions of the game, the development process itself, whether it's with marketing. I mean, there's so many different things. And then what does that say too? Like I think that's a great example too with the cape, is like, what does that say in terms of what your brand is, what your values are, what are you trying to like, what's your intent, what are you showcasing there really? It's like, you know, and we don't have to answer that, but still, I think those are always good questions to ask. Like, what is this really saying about you, your brand, how you guys are representing yourself out there to everybody else?
Well, I'll answer it.
All right.
What it, what that cape shows me is that game studio listens to its community.
Mm,
It listens to the players because they made this cape to be like, "Hey, you all were right. This was a sucky situation and we changed, and this is something to commemorate that."
yeah, yeah, exactly. And you know, it's funny because I know of in the past we've talked about memorable moments in games, and usually they're mostly, I think, yeah, they're primarily associated with the in-game experience. But now here's an example too, where that's kind of a memorable moment, but outside of games, and I think those are even more remarkable and astounding than the ones inside. Now, they're still valuable inside, but when there's opportunities that present themselves like that, and again, I think a lot of times those things come out of weaknesses or unfortunate events where they can be truly impactful. And again, it goes right back to how you
Mm-hmm.
are as a brand, how you represent yourself, how you showcase and show your values. So
Yeah. And I think limitations can often cause us to like reach that more creative side of us. You have to be creative to go around the limitations.
yeah, because if you, I can relate this to kids. If you have every toy in the world at your disposal, they're gonna love those things for about a week, and
Yeah.
right, and then next thing you know, they're bored of it. They don't want to touch it, and then you know they go over a friend's house, and then they play with that toy that you have at your house nonstop, and say, "Why can't we play with it?" It's like, well, we have it here, and they come back and are like, "Oh yeah." Right? Anyways, I don't know if other people have that problem. If you have kids, I do, and it's not just a me problem. As far as I know, every other parent has that one too. But still, it's like if you have everything at your disposal, then you can't be creative and all the time and how you leverage that. But through limitations, yeah, a lot of creativity can come out of that. So.
Absolutely.
All right, great stuff. Thank you so much. But before we close, and I know you covered one of these in particular, but like any other suggestions or things people should, you know, take away from our discussion here, because we definitely talked a lot today.
Yeah. I think the like main things to take away are like just do the thing because you can get better as you go on, and you will get better as you go on. To remember that like the things that limit you are also the things that will propel you further. And 3, one I didn't say but wanted to say is that you should reach out to your network and ask for help. People want to help you, and especially, you know, right now with, you know, the gaming industry and the job market being as tough as it is right now, people really want to do something. And it like, I remember in college, it was like, I really want to make a video or, you know, make a trailer, but I don't have a product to make a trailer for. And so a lot of people turn to films and games that already exist and make trailers for those. But if you go on LinkedIn or go on TikTok or Instagram or wherever you are, and you reach out to your network and you say, hey, like, I have this game, I would really like a trailer for it. I, you know, only have this much of a budget, or I don't have a budget, I'm sorry, but like, you know, I'm looking for this. There are people who want to help you with that.
Yeah, no, and well said, because you can't just assume that X, Y, or Z reason is going to be the fact that they don't help you. But here's the thing, that could still be the case, but there are lots of other reasons, other factors that people want to help. Maybe it could benefit them. Maybe it could give them the opportunity that they need to get further. And if that's the case, it's that what they're going to be potentially doing for you is going to be probably mean a lot more for them than it might for you. And if you put yourself or find those types of situations, one, it's going to be beneficial for both parties, but 2, they'll remember that. And then who knows, that could create so many other opportunities. So don't just assume that what you're looking for or what you need help with isn't going to pay you back dividends down the road. And I mean that in more of a relationship manner. And yeah, it could relate to sales. It could relate to whatever other objectives that you have. But you can't discount that. You know, and it's with the fine degree, right? Because we got to be mindful of our time and everything else. But still, if you're willing to and want to in some capacity, don't just assume these things. Just, you know, do what you think would be best for you and other people out there too. Such a great closing, Mark. I absolutely love that you shared that with us. Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you.
Well, it's been great, a joy to have you here on the show. But before we depart, where can people connect, find out more about you, the work you do? Please give us some links so people can learn more or connect.
Yeah, so I'm super, super always on LinkedIn. So Sophia Louisa Miller on LinkedIn. I just recently made a Twitter/X account. You can find me there at Sophia Plays Games. And then I have a TikTok. I don't have a ton of video game content on there yet, but I'm planning on adding more, and that would be Glittery Soph. So that's like glittery, GLITTERYSOPH.
Awesome. And folks, all these links will be in the show notes. So if you want to connect, reach out, or just check out what's going on, you can do so by checking that out and seeing, what's kind of going on in Sophia's world. So, well, again, Sophia, thank you so much for being a guest on the show today and sharing these insights. Because, I mean, you know, it's good stuff, really diving in deep into all this this brand stuff where, you know, it's not really brand, right? It's just, there's so much more to it. So hope you got some good takeaways. And again, it was great having you on the show.
Thank you so much. I had a really fun time.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com, the number episode of the show. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.